different type of video. I don't know which camera I'm looking at. But today we've got Lynn Barber, which is quite an honour. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
And yeah, so we're doing a bit of a podcast. Harry, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I basically was aware of you and your oeuvre from Mostly Men, which, as I said a bit
Oh, my
earlier,
first collected interviews, yes.
absolutely,
Yes.
and bought for me by my girlfriend Rosa when I was sort of in my late teens,
Oh, great.
and a sort of collection of your wonderful work, your initial interviews, I guess,
Yeah.
Mostly Men.
Yes.
Actually, that I can ask an interesting question about that. I mean, do you prefer photo? I mean, I'm sure you've been asked all the time, but do you prefer photographing men or photographing
Photograph, I don't.
interviewing?
Well, certainly in the early days I did, and was very much more comfortable interviewing men. I mean, I think by now it doesn't, it doesn't make any difference really, but I was wary of interviewing women because I was especially worried if they had children, and I was thinking I might say something nasty that would get repeated back at school, and all the rest of it. And also, I don't do the sort of sisterly bonding thing you're supposed to do with other women. I just don't. So, anyway, I was comfortable with men, and because I'd brought up having big arguments with my father. I was used to having men shouting at me, which was quite an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, we were driving up, and I said to Fred. Fred was sort of. I said she'll probably be smoking, and if I'm talking too much, Fred, just tell me to shut the fuck up.
Yes.
And I said, Lynn, it has the skin of a rhino. She won't care.
Yeah.
She'll regard kind of conventional notions of
Politeness.
behaviour as
I know.
bourgeois.
I know.
And I always thought you were a part. When I did these shoots, it was always great when you were on board because although I will say I remember my first sort of interactions with you consisted of you telling me that I would have 5 minutes at the end of our hour.
Yes.
I always sort of felt that I was in service to something worthwhile.
Oh, good. Okay.
And,
Well,
you know,
you were.
a forensic examination, and that there's a psychological component, isn't there? You're a very shrewd judge of character.
Well, I hope I am. I mean, who knows, actually. But I think that's how I've got through my career as an interviewer, that people did come to sort of trust me as, if I said someone was good, they were good. If I said they were bad, whatever.
Yeah, in fact, I was telling Fred because I had a rather dubious experience. I was going to say dubious pleasure. It wasn't a pleasure of photographing Jimmy Savile,
Oh,
and to
but
your credit,
yes.
tell us about how your
Well,
interaction with him.
did you do the photo that went with my piece, or was it for another?
I think it was another time. I
Yeah.
wasn't that big back then, and so I would have liked to have
Actually,
done.
yeah, no, it wouldn't have been you because anyway. Well, tell you about what I interviewed Jimmy Savile. I when he'd just been given a knighthood, and everyone was saying what a wonderful person he was. And I knew because everyone had been saying, he likes little girls. And it's really irritating, those things that people say, of course everyone says, everyone knows. And then you can't pin it down. So I did, in the course of the interview, say to him, do you know that people say that you like little girls? And it was a way of getting it into print, because I wasn't saying that he liked little girls, but I was just sort of making sure it was on the record that this was a rumour.
And I think time has sort of vindicated that.
Well, I think it has, yes.
Absolutely.
There's quite a lot, yes.
Tsunami of vindication.
And little boys and little everything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, did you get a sense that he was a wrong 'un then when you met him?
I certainly got a sense that he was a weird one. Yeah, I'm not sure what I thought. I thought he was a very sort of repulsive person. And yeah, he sort of said something like, if I was ever down at Stoke Mandeville, look him up. And I thought, yeah, I don't think I'll be doing that, I don't know, but I also thought that I slightly took his line that if he is not capable of sort of falling in love or having relationships or any sort of normal life, that what he chose to do, which was just to run marathons and raise enormous sums of money, was quite a good way of spending his time, and I agreed on that.
So you kind of really accepted the fact that, you know, you're kind of, I think you're quite radical in a way, because I think you kind of believe in personal freedom, and so you kind of cut him some slack because it was an unconventional lifestyle choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly in favour, and I think every interviewer should be of, you know, believing that everyone is different and not trying to sort of shunt them into nice little piles here and there.
Yeah. Did those sort of sparring with your father,
Yeah.
you know, that sort of prepared you for, you know, the subsequent, you know, interviews that you did, do you think that sort of actually, you know, as an alternative in the conventional way that, you know, I'm thinking of Marianne MacDonald, you know, who I also worked with.
Hang on, who's she?
She was one of your contemporaries. Well, not one of your contemporaries at all. A sort of maybe 20, my age.
Yeah.
And she was coming on the scene and trying to be like Lynn Barber. And I always felt that, you know, that you were kind of, you had a unique kind of approach, and whereas she had a more of a conventional, and, you know, she was sort of doing it by, I think there's a genuine curiosity and a genuine kind of, a kind of cold detachment in a way, which actually serves you well, which I as a photographer feel
You
I have.
also have to have. Yeah, I do feel that, I mean, I think you said that I was a good judge of people, or I understood people. I mean, I don't feel that I am. I feel that I need to really work at it, whereas most people sort of, I don't know, seem to automatically think that they understand people. But also I do value individuality, and if people are talking, they're just talking the same sort of mush as everyone else, I'm not interested.
Do you think if you've been born now, that you might have been regarded as on the spectrum?
Yeah, you're not the first person to have said that. Well, yeah, it's possible. It's true. I don't care. I don't. I don't care what other people think about me at all. Which is quite rare for a woman, particularly. And I don't think I'm on the spectrum, but I'm maybe not very nuanced or subtle in my interactions with people.
I think it's lovely to be able to, in a cerebral way, detach yourself from, like, as I said, conventional notions of behaviour and discuss anything.
Yeah.
Jimmy Savile with complete, you know, abandon, and so I think that's an important element to your approach. That, and, you know, your kind of prose and everything, which can be sort of lacerating. Or that's what was
nice.
I was telling Fred, I was sort of filling him in. Obviously, he'd heard of you, but, you know, we were in parallel for a while, and he was sort of called the Demon Barber of Fleet Street because of the. I remember in one particular interview you did. I unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to take the pictures of, and it was always stuck in my mind of Robert Redford, who was sort of this great beauty when he was young, and I think you described his skin as like like a child's sandpit
After rain. I know, and actually that's quite unusual for me, because I'm not usually rude about people's appearance. But I mean, in the case of someone like Robert Redford, who was famously beautiful and then quite sort of shockingly unbeautiful when I saw him. But also he was very nasty to me. Did I say that in the piece? That I had a terrible coughing fit while I was interviewing him. And he had a glass of water on the table next to him and didn't offer it.
Would you like some water, actually?
No. No, okay.
We can stop and you can have some water.
I can grab you a glass if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Yes, thank you.
So how did you, maybe you could speak, when did you first get the name Demon Barber of Fleet Street?
Well, it was odd, actually, because I'd I've been doing quite hard-hitting interviews for the Sunday Express, which I worked on before. And nobody had particularly called me a hatchet woman or anything, although I included quite a few hatchety pieces. But when I went to the Independent on Sunday, suddenly people started saying that I only did hatchet jobs, which is very unfair because I didn't only do hatchet jobs by any means, but it just happens. Yeah, so I got a reputation as a hatchet woman, which I think is unfair. Thank you. I mean, I'd say only done about half a dozen real hatchet jobs.
So, what are there any? I mean, I'm sure this is a Chat GPT kind of question, an AI type question. But are there any sort of interviews that you've done that really stand out where you kind of where it went catastrophically wrong? I'm sure there are. I mean, I can think of one recently I did with Jeremy Clarkson.
Oh, really? What?
Well, you'll have to watch. Well, you could watch the video, but unfortunately, we had to take the video down because Amazon Prime got very heavy with us. And basically tried to strong arm the Guardian into getting us to take it down.
And they did.
We decided to take it down off our own bat because I wanted to honour my relationship with the Guardian, and I've worked with them for 30
Do you belong
years.
to the Guardian?
No, I'm freelance. I'm the same as you. In fact, I was going to say I've sort of followed you. I did work for the Express, but not very many times. But I did work for the Independent, and then when you went to the Observer, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then I went across for the Sunday Times, and I checked our last.
What was the last one?
Well, the last one that I have in my diary, where I made a note of your name, was Robert Peston.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was my memory of that is that he had very natty shoes.
Yes. I found him quite hard. I mean, quite hard to read, and quite didn't warm to him. I didn't know you did that. I remember doing Emma Thompson with you, and you, as usual, talked too much and charmed her and everything. But I'd forgotten that. But
I've forgotten about that because quite often. You'd be utterly contemptuous of the fact that I'd be showing people my little portfolio and but it was a kind of ruse to get people on side and everything, and you were kind of like, let me see the meat.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But I mean, I one memorable shoot, and it was actually I actually think about it with fondness. And I don't know whether you've seen the video. It's with Björk.
Oh, no.
We went to Iceland, and I talk about the fact that you managed to turn it into a romantic weekend for two.
Yeah,
and David,
my husband. Yeah,
he was lovely. I remember. I was saying to Fred, I really regret not taking a picture of the two of you together.
Oh yeah.
But it was sort of very. Did you like Björk? Did you find that?
Oh yeah. Well, I certainly impressed and intrigued by her. I mean, yeah, no, I did.
Was she a good interview?
She was actually, yeah, and I was very. I mean. She's wacky, obviously. No, she was. I admired her music. I admired her sort of persona. I admired everything about her, actually, yeah.
We were talking about Margaret Drabble earlier,
Yeah.
and I was talking about how Margaret Drabble wrote a short story about me, which is sort of, for someone who's slightly self-obsessed, is kind of like a wonderful thing to happen.
Yeah.
And do you find, are there certain times that you sort of think about who you're interviewing and thinking, this is extraordinary, this is such a pleasure and a privilege?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But, and I, occasionally I've been almost overwhelmed by it. But of course that is so bad. I mean, that's very sort of unprofessional. But I remember interviewing Muriel Spark and thinking, gosh, I am interviewing Muriel Spark. But it's a sort of unhelpful thing. You can't really afford to be too respectful or too impressed or too fan-like, can you?
And of course, the worst thing you can do is actually tell them that you're a fan.
Oh, yes. Never do that, yes. But you did Jarvis Cocker, didn't you?
Yeah, we did Jarvis in this very house.
In this very house. And he, weirdly, he insisted on coming to me rather than me going to him. And I was a real fan, like a sort of my heart goes pitter pat. So that was just strange, and he was very keen on keeping it normal, keeping it natural. But of course, then you sort of realise how actually unnatural it is interviewing somebody. And he'd asked me to make him breakfast. And I was trying to make him breakfast, which I'm not very good at anyway. So I was sort of worrying about that and worrying about asking him questions. And then we went up to the park or the cemetery, did we?
Well, the Observer always have sort of silly ideas. They were thinking Highgate Cemetery, which, of course, the sort of municipal ordinariness of Jarvis. He had to be in Waterloo Park. Is it Waterloo? Yeah. So that's where we took the sort of iconic picture of it, which was on the cover.
Yes.
But I remember photographing him in your daughter's room, and your daughter would have been a teenager.
Up in her top, and you got a bedspread on the wall, or she had. Was it there anyway, or you put it up there?
I think I wouldn't have been so presumptuous.
No, well, anyway, that was a very nice picture.
What do your kids think? I mean, you've got 2 daughters.
Yeah.
What do they think of your profession? Are they proud? Are they sort of?
Yes, they're always a bit surprised. Actually, I had it was a very good and very unusual these days moment, but I'd gone with 4 grandchildren and the daughter and both families. I've got 2 daughters, both married to husbands in Brighton, both with 2 children. And we'd all gone to the David Hockney immersive show at King's Cross. And somebody there came up to me and said, "Are you Lynn Barber?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Oh, God." And I was sort of trying to summon the grandchildren, come and listen to this,
they got to know who they're dealing with.
Yeah.
What do they call you, Granny, or?
Yes.
Is that too personal a question?
Well, no, it's a bit complicated because they've got Granny B and Granny C.
Right, of course. Yeah. Have you enjoyed that aspect of life?
Being grandmother? Yeah. Very much, but also I think even more that my husband, who died before any of the grandchildren were born, he would have adored it, because he just loved sort of taking children to the park and all that thing. I'm not into all that, but yeah, no, I enjoy it. But David would have been so blissfully happy, and he wasn't here for.
I got when we were together. I think I talked to you about. I mean, I just got the sense that. I mean, I think you would probably say this, that he was kind of the nice one.
Yes, absolutely.
That you were the sort of
cop, nasty cop. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
he was a very sweet man. I do remember that even now, 30 years later. He was a great guy. And yeah, you're right. That he probably would have made a good grandpa.
So looping back, earlier we spoke about an AI question, catastrophic interviews. Maybe you said something when I was in the kitchen, but did you have one in particular?
Actually, in a way, it's cheating because I was a print interviewer. If an interview was really dud, I'd just not write it, so it wouldn't go into print. If it was catastrophic in the sense that we'd had a row, like me and Marianne Faithfull, then that makes a lovely piece, a joy to write, as far as I'm concerned. No, for me, it's sort of not catastrophic. It's just dull interviews where I sort of quite like the person. I can't take against them. I can't rave about them. They're a very nice person, somebody like Jane Asher or Michael Palin or something like that. They're nice, and having said they're nice, then what? What do you say next?
That's quite interesting actually, because on our channel we've noticed that negativity almost sells. Videos do quite well.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. Yeah, so I can imagine that having an impact on your writing.
Plus, there's the fact that if you're taking against somebody, you've got to sort of stand it up. I mean, you've got to sort of produce evidence or reasons why you don't like them. Whereas if you just say, "Oh, Michael Palin's a really nice bloke," you don't need to say any more, basically.
Interesting that
Yeah.
you mentioned Marianne Faithfull, because our latest video we talked about that, and my experience was going to Ireland,
Oh,
and actually the interviewer was Marianne MacDonald, who you don't remember, but she's actually not an interviewer now. I think she
oh,
does something else. But she basically was named after Marianne Faithfull.
oh, God.
And I think she was kind of very obsequious and, cultivated a great rapport. And Marianne Faithfull we arrived at this shell cottage.
Oh,
She was living on
yeah.
this big estate, an aristocratic estate outside of Dublin. And, it was great from her perspective because it
Yeah.
was she was just saying she's really nice.
Oh,
Whereas she was the most vulnerable and kind of I don't want to use the word broken, but kind of very emotionally raw person I've ever had to photograph. And
Yeah.
I really got about halfway through 2 rolls of 12 exposures, and she just said, "I can't do this," and she just walked away. And
oh,
I had to sort of make do with about sort of 20
uh,
individual frames, and luckily I got it. It was for the Independent.
yeah.
But how was your Marianne experience?
Oh, it's a great long saga. I'm not going to tell you all that, but I mean, she kept me hanging around all day, and she's been photographed by David Bailey, and I was supposed to pick her up there and then go to tea or something. But well, she started late, she went on late, then she got this ghastly Frenchman with her. Did she have him when you were?
I don't remember a Frenchman.
Well, who apparently was her lover. Anyway. Well, she just messed me around so much. And then when I asked her a question, the Frenchman kept interrupting and saying, "You're not allowed to ask that," and all the rest of it. So it was bad. But on the other hand, I sort of walked away from that encounter thinking, "Oh, get me to my typewriter. I can't wait to write this," Whereas if it's somebody I very recently interviewed, Kemi Badenoch for You magazine, and I didn't come away thinking I can't wait to write it. I just came away thinking, how should I write this? I'm very impressed by her, but I'm somehow impressed but don't like her, which is sort of weird sort of way of feeling, really. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's weird to have that ambivalence. Isn't
yeah. I was dead impressed. But then I suddenly thought, well, actually, that was sort of the effect that Mrs. Thatcher had on people. That you think, "Oh, what an amazing woman," but run away fast. And I think probably Kemi Badenoch's the same sort of thing.
I think you're right. I mean, did you get to
Have-
do Baroness Thatcher?
No, I never did. Did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
It was the most strange experience because I went to college and I went on marches against her and everything. And so in 2007, when I shot her for Time magazine, it was I was so ambivalent because
Yeah.
she was a really, I was interested. I haven't watched the whole of it yet, but I watched the Steve Coogan documentary
anyway.
about the interview with Brian Walden. And Steve Coogan, again, very, very politically to the left, but he had to warrant that, had to acknowledge that she has this, she's a substantial person, a serious person.
Yeah.
And but then add into the mix her succumbing to human frailty, like she obviously had some cognitive decline.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a poignant day, and also something that I felt that my whole career had been leading to, because she'd loomed so large.
Yeah. Was she already? What year was it? Was she already?
2007. So she was. It was interesting because I shot Rupert Murdoch in the same year.
Oh, I envy you. Yeah.
They're roughly the same age, and I told Rupert Murdoch, I thought they'd be friends, and so I mentioned to Rupert Murdoch about Baroness Thatcher.
Yeah.
And I thought we could bond over the fact that I'd photographed her, and he was in good company.
Yeah.
And he said, "She's gone a bit gaga, hasn't she?"
Oh, really? Oh,
and, I didn't obviously agree wholeheartedly, but I had to acknowledge that there was definitely some cognitive decline, which is sort of very disconcerting because she was such powerful figure, wasn't she?
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm sure Kemi Badenoch would be very pleased with that you were making that comparison.
Oh yes, she would. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's just it's sort of hard to write when you're. I don't want to knock her down. I don't need to build her up because she builds herself up. But anyway,
What was it you didn't like about her?
no, it's not that I didn't. I mean, I was impressed, and I was so impressed. I sort of felt like a sort of inferior species slightly. But if I tried to pin down, was there anything she said or did that made me feel inferior? I can't do it. I just thought she is very, very impressive,
Mm, mm. And you're getting back to, are there any other interviews that you've done that you kind of look back on? And, do you think you got better as an interviewer as you got older?
Well, up to a certain extent, I'm certainly not better now. But I'm 80. But well, I began to trust my. Oh, sorry, I hit the microphone.
That's fine.
Did I get better? Yeah, I think maybe I did, and also I learned to trust my own instincts more. If I get a little sort of hunch that somebody is sort of vulnerable on this point, or I must remember to ask them about their health or something. It's as if something comes into my head and says, "Oh, just notice this," and then I'll ask about it, and sometimes I'm right,
A bit like Columbo.
What?
Columbo, the American detective, he'd sort of be solving a case and he'd sort of lull the person he was questioning into a false sense of security, and he'd be putting on his raincoat and leaving, and then he'd go, "Oh, just one more
By
thing."
the way, oh yeah, oh good, yeah.
The one
yes.
thing that I always noticed, which was to your credit, when we did our, shoots and so on, was that you would always, quite often, you would ask me if I'd sort of noticed anything, or
Yes.
so you didn't leave any stones unturned. So when we did Jarvis,
Yes.
Jarvis arrived in a brown Porsche 911.
Yeah, but not his.
Not his. It was
No.
his PR,
Yeah.
who
Yes.
was at the time Phil Savage,
Oh,
who
right.
was sort of well known in the industry as
Yeah.
somebody who was sort of gender non-conforming, you might say.
Oh.
And I remember you being very intrigued by that. And
yes.
Sort of, because I'd worked for the NME and everything, I was sort of
You knew
very
them.
familiar. Yeah, but I
right.
was pleased to fill you in. But I think
Yeah.
you were saying, is that Jarvis's lover?
Yeah, I know. I can. Yeah, but they were. Yeah, no. And it was funny because he, the PR person, sort of looked like a pop star, and Jarvis absolutely didn't.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think we should talk about is your latest book, and without wishing to sort of, it's a really good read, and I think it's wonderful that you've sort of found a home for your kind of creative bohemian spirit, which is sort of art establishment, which you couldn't have sort of seen coming, I imagine.
Well, no, I mean, it was very odd how that book came about, that it was just that an old friend of mine said she was starting a publishing house, and would I write a book for her? And I said, well, no, it's too much like hard work. And she said, I was supposing it was just very short. And she said, what would you like to write about? And I realized, I had been thinking, for some time, that I had done lots of good interviews with artists, which had never been collected into a book of interviews or anything. And that my sort of veneration for artists remains as strong as ever. Whereas actors I hate, artists I love, And so when she said, would I do a small book on artists, it just came very easily, actually.
And you've got an ongoing, I mean, I'd like to think that Tracy's my friend as well.
Yeah,
because I photographed her several times, and I love her work. I find it very moving.
Oh, good.
I remember going and seeing her show that she did down in Peckham.
Yeah.
And I think Miranda Sawyer was doing the interview. I don't think you were doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I photographed her about 5 or 6 times. But I remember seeing the piece that she did about dancing in Margate,
Oh
the
yes.
disco dancing, and these boys were like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
shaming her.
Slags.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was really moved, and I found that I was starting to cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But tell us about that friendship, because that's something that is
Well,
quite
it is.
endured.
I know, and it is very odd because I interview. Oh, I became her. I went to interview her, and somehow we just hit it off so well that we became friends. But it was a sort of what I think of as a sort of social friendship, in that she'd asked me to parties and things. But I mean, not sort of like best friend sort of thing. But then when my husband died, she was incredibly good and kept ringing me up. She kept asking me out to things. And she got in her head that I was becoming agoraphobic. And I was saying, well, no, I'm not agoraphobic, but I just don't want to go to parties at the moment. I mean, why would you? Um, but anyway, no, she was a real good, kind friend. And, well, she's somebody I hugely admire, obviously, and find very stimulating. She's a bit like you, Harry, in that if she goes on a talking about herself, Jack, it can last for 3 hours. And have learned with Tracy to sort of say, "Hey, time to talk about me now."
I wonder whether the two of you are kind of kindred spirits because of
Yeah.
that kind of. And I know I was telling Fred that you were very explicit about when you were at Oxford how you were very rampantly promiscuous,
Yeah.
and that's sort of Tracy went through that same sort of
Oh, yeah.
thing, and I don't know whether you've ever thought about that, because I think we're drawn to people who have a similar idea of normal.
I'm not.
You're shameless. You're kind of
Well, yeah.
you refuse to be kind of
Yeah. Well, also, something like part of the thing that drove me to publicise the fact that I slept with an awful lot of men at Oxford was that for my generation growing up, we were told that if you get a reputation for sleeping around, you will never find a nice husband. And I would produce David and say, I slept around, I found a nice husband, I'm right, you're wrong. But I don't, yeah, I mean, we're both fairly, I don't know, shameless or explicit or something, talking about sex. Oh, having said that, we don't talk about sex. But I mean, she's not, and she is like me in that she's not worried about what other people think. She's not going to sort of bend herself to please somebody else, I think.
Absolutely. I think you're both. I think artists, and I think you're an
That
artist. You're in pursuit of the truth,
well,
and you
yes,
revere the truth.
yeah,
And there isn't really anything else.
and why succumb to sort of boring social norms? Because they're not very interesting on the whole. But actually, I ran into Sarah Lucas, who's another artist I
I saw
hugely
that. Yeah.
admire. Just a couple of nights, well, no, weeks ago or so, and she says she's become a farmer. And she's bought the 50 acres next to her cottage, and she's now a farmer. And I said, no, you can't be, stop it. And I said, well, you could do land art. And she said, oh, yeah, maybe I will. So maybe she will.
Or maybe you're a catalyst for
Yeah,
ideas.
I don't see. Listen, this is the sort of time at which I need a glass of wine.
A quick question then. What in the light of sort of this type of thing, YouTubers and influencers, all these sorts of people, Lynn.
I haven't really got into all that.
It's a kind of, it's been democratized. So, and also printed media is in terminal decline. So, this is our little platform, really. What do you think about that? Do you think you would have a YouTube channel if you were starting now?
I wondered about that, or about how. I'm not sure I would, because my, as it were, way into my career was that I love writing, and it was always as a writer that I saw myself, and it turned out that I was also very good at interviewing, and that there was a great demand, especially in the 80s and 90s. There was a great demand. Are you all right with me smoking and drinking?
No, of course.
Okay.
We're both. I'm an ex-smoker as well. So
Okay. So I sort of crystallized, I narrowed down the things I did, and then it was all interviews. But I wouldn't, when I was young, I wouldn't have sort of said my career is going to be interviewing people. It would be more likely trying to write short stories or something.
And you were, I was telling Fred, your background was sort of, were you a grammar school girl? Or did you go to like a minor public school?
Yeah, it was. I was on a scholarship to a posh girls' school, and then I went to Oxford, where I read English, and then I wanted to get into journalism, and the only place that offered me a job was Penthouse magazine, so that's what I did for 7 years, and that was very educational. And then I got into, as
Bob
it were,
Guccione.
Bob Guccione.
In fact, it's really good you brought that up, because that's something that we should talk about. Because that
What?
I just think when you're starting out,
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do. So
Yeah.
I was working for trade magazines. I wasn't doing porno shoots or anything
I
like that.
wasn't a model, alas. I was an editor for Penthouse
I know,
magazine.
but you were kind of intellectually making Penthouse seem a sort of an intellectual exercise,
yes,
rather
absolutely.
than kind of masturbatory.
Mm.
But so how did you make that transition then from did the articles sort of garner a lot of interest? Did you get some good people to interview and so on for Penthouse?
For Penthouse? Oh, no, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, I was
You were a
books
kind of
editor, reviews editor, letters editor. I was all sorts of things, but I wasn't particularly writing it. And the only interviews I did, which perhaps were good training, was that there was a series called Parameters of Sexuality, which was weirdos and freaks, basically, where, thank you, where I'd interview somebody sort of, Harry is a transvestite, or Harry is something like that. But they were all people who'd written in volunteering to be interviewed about their taste, their weirdo taste. And so it wasn't difficult getting them to talk. They were keen to talk. But my job was to sort of push it a bit more specific each time. Like, if you're keen on amputees, what limb do you want to have amputated, sort of thing. And that, I think that made me good at just listening to sort of strange stories and not at any point expressing sort of horror or shock or anything. You want to poo on her. Oh, really? And anyway, that was all that I got from Penthouse. And then I didn't sort of, I mean, it's very odd.
So you weren't talent spotted?
No, I mean,
is there a compendium of those interviews? Because with Share Height and the Height Report, it probably would have done quite well as a book.
I'm not sure I would have wanted to do it as a book, but anyway, I did write a book called How to Improve Your Man in Bed, which was a bestseller that kept us financially afloat. When I gave up Penthouse, I was 5 years having, at home with the children, being a playgroup mum, and I always say that was the hardest 5 years I ever spent.
It's very difficult balancing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being a good parent and
Well,
having a career.
But I wasn't having careers. I gave up my career
Oh, yeah.
in order to be a playgroup mum.
But you had the royalties for
And backed up by royalties from How to Improve Your Man in Bed.
What's the sort of takeaway from that? If there's one thing that our female listeners could glean from that book, what would it be?
But How to Improve
Yeah.
Your... Oh, God, don't. It's too old-fashioned. It's just useless. And also nowadays, I mean, it would just be mad to read a book on how to conduct a sex life when you can watch videos and things, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's what powers the internet, really, is porn.
But
So was there one person that sort of thought, hang on a minute, this person would be good at doing interviews, that you can attribute to?
Oh no, it wasn't like that. I mean, it was actually very strange that somebody had been an editor at Penthouse, who'd been the editor who hired me, in fact, because Bob Guccione did all the photographs and visual side, but the words were the province of Harry Fieldhouse, who hired me as his assistant. And he always knew I could, encouraged me to write, knew I could write. And then I took all these years off, and Harry phoned me out of the blue years later and said that he's just joining a new magazine called the Sunday Express magazine, and they wanted somebody to come and do back of the book interviews. And he just hired me for a job, and we hadn't had any contact even for about 4 or 5 years. But he had, he knew I was efficient, I was good at deadlines and all that. And he had great faith in me, and so he encouraged me. And so then I was in Fleet Street. So I jumped from Penthouse to Fleet Street.
Amazing. And seeing as this is a photography channel, do you have any thoughts about photographers that I know that you've told me about other photographers that you find very annoying. I'm thinking about John Reardon for some reason.
Who was it?
John Reardon.
Can't
who's
remember.
No longer with us, sadly. So maybe we shouldn't speak ill of.
Well, also
John Reardon.
I can't remember. Well, I did used to work sometimes for the Observer with Jane Byrne.
Yeah.
And I mean, a wonderful photographer, but I really didn't like working with her because she was always so nice and friendly. She would get chatting to the interviewee, and they, as a relief from, me bombarding them with nasty questions, would happily chat to Jane Byrne. And I resented, I don't know, I just resented her taking the time, but also, as I saw it, ingratiating us with the subject, which I don't know, it was an awkward. So I, hugely respect her as a photographer, but always with the feeling, I hope she doesn't come with me. I mean, if she did the photos in a separate session, then fine. You're just getting a cat on your shoulder. But, and then, I can't remember the name, but there was a tragic case. Well, not tragic, no, not remotely tragic, but one photographer I worked with sometimes, I think this would have been for the Sunday Express magazine, who is a famous photographer whose name I've forgotten, but also charged very high rates. I happened to mention that I was going to Italy to interview Pavarotti, and he said, "Oh, I'll do that session free of charge." I mean, in theory, he could have, because in those days, photographers got paid for what, 5,000 a day or something, didn't they? And if he'd had to go to Italy and all, so it would have been too expensive for them.
I never got 5,000 a day, but,
sorry.
but I know what you mean. I mean, things were different back then, weren't they?
Things were different back then, but anyway, a very, very good, well-respected photographer actually volunteered to come with me to Modena to interview Pavarotti so he could do the photos. And, vast loss of earnings to himself. And then Pavarotti sort of putty in my hand, sweetened pie with me, was that absolutely foul to the photographer and just walked in. The photographer spent ages setting up lights and things in a summer house in the garden. Pavarotti walked into this and just walked out again and said no. Um, and we didn't know why. Subsequently found out that, of course, he'd realised that this photograph would be, um, I'm not sure it's full length, but it would show how fat he was. Whereas if he'd just been photographed by the neck up, it would be all right. But I mean, that was a very sad thing where I felt very sorry for the photographer. Um, and nothing I could do. I mean, the photographer had taken a couple of snapshots, but that was about it. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously I respect photographers, but I do see it as a different thing. But actually, I'll tell you a funny thing, that when people are delighted, they say that they're delighted with my piece. It's often because they're delighted with the photograph. If they read my piece a bit more carefully, they wouldn't be that delighted. But conversely, I think it has occasionally happened that they're not pleased with the photograph. So even though it's a very good piece, they're not pleased with the piece. I suppose, yeah, pictures count more than words, I guess.
Well, yeah, to some people, I definitely think that's it. Yeah.
Mm.
Do you have any questions, Fred?
Well, I was thinking earlier you were mentioning as you got older, you kind of trusted your gut a little bit more. I was wondering how kind of media's perception on people affected your writing or your pieces. So if someone like Jimmy Savile was very kind of seen in negative light in the media, but
Yeah.
you found him to be really nice, how would that
Yes,
affect
I
your
mean, it
writing?
wasn't like that with Jimmy Savile, but let me think. Yeah, no, I mean, I've always thought that um, sort of don't take other people's word for it. If people have if there've been a dozen people pieces saying that uh, uh, Felicity Kendall is a really nice woman, but I didn't find her, so I'm quite capable of saying that.
I remember all these. I remember your one about. I do remember the one about Marianne Faithfull
Yeah.
because it sort of got incrementally more tense because you
Yes.
built it up and it sort of
Yeah.
time was passing and it was sort of
Yes.
like you were getting more and more
I was
irritated.
getting furious.
Sorry, Fred. Yeah, so I remember that one about Marianne Faithfull and how time was incrementally passing and how
Yeah.
tense it was all getting. Yeah, no. So I think
We're done. Oh,
yeah.
good. Thank
Thanks for
you.
being so patient, Lynn.
No.
I want to talk about your book or anything, because
Oh,
we have about almost 20,000 subscribers. So you.
well, buy my book. But, well, I don't think we actually said what it was called. So it's called A Little. How can we? I, I wrote this book recently, last year, called A Little Art Education, which is based on my interest with artists and artists I've become friends with. Um, and it for me it was a late life blossoming. I mean, I've been saying for years I'd never write another book because it is such hard work.
Mm.
And but then when a friend said she'd become a publisher and wanted me to write a book, and it only had to be a very short book, I didn't have to sort of spin it out. Then I was very happy to do it, and I'm glad I did it. And she threw me a very nice party for the book launch, which was also my 80th birthday. So
I'm
that
really
was
sorry I couldn't make that. I was
Mm.
in Devon, so
Oh, okay.
that would have been. Was
Mm.
it a good do? Did I miss a
Yeah,
good do?
well, it was a bit of a weird party because there were artists, there were friends, obviously, and then there were the publishers has also asked a lot of other people. But anyway, no, yeah, no, it was good.
Mm.
And I had a famous cake, which actually somebody actually made a cake like an ashtray with lots of stubs in it, which was the real star of the show. Yeah, everyone. Yeah, and I'd said to people, "Oh, take some photos of the party and send me." All of them had sent me photos of cake. Oh,
Do you want me to? Would you like me to do a portrait, or are you happy to carry on using your pictures from 50 years ago?
I think the old ones are better. Well, I don't know, but that's because somebody did take a photo of me recently, and I thought, oh fuck, I shouldn't. I've been very happy handing out your photos, Harry. Thank you.
It's funny because I get a call from Tatler magazine, and it's we're just checking.
Yeah.
Lynn's told us that I've given her, she's been given the copyright by you,
Oh, yeah.
and but I'm just checking, and I said, yeah, no, of course,
Yeah.
I support you in all your endeavours, Lynn.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. And it has been good because any time anyone asks for a picture, I'm very happy to use yours, and I very hate it. I can't remember. Somebody did come and photograph me recently, and spent hours over it, and they said, "Oh, you're bound to like him, and he's very thoughtful and sensitive." And I just thought, I mean, it's not. Anyway, you've taken some lovely photos, and I think I'll continue using those if I may.
Well, it's an open offer if you
Thank
do want
you.
me to.
Oh, thank you.
Or if if Sainsbury's magazine, which I think was the person that I shot, a magazine for which I shot the pictures we did before.
No, I've never done that.
No, oh, somebody,
anyway,
Waitrose or something. Yeah, anyway,
yeah.
it probably wasn't actually. But if a magazine do want to do a session with you, put my name into the hat.
Oh, I will.
At least
yeah.
at least it's the devil you know.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's pretty rare now that would happen. But
that's the thing about I pointed out at the end of the Marianne Faithfull thing. Whatever you think of her, she really kind of, and I think this is the secret to having a long and sustained career, is reinvention. And so that's why it's quite nice the way that you've become an art world, kind of a part of the art establishment. Belatedly.
Oh, don't say that. I mean, I'm really not part of the art establishment. I would hate to be part of the art establishment.
No, I know you're not.
It's just that because I get on with the artists and tend to interview them well, I thought it was worth sort of boosting that side of things. And also it's a side of my life that I get a lot of pleasure from. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I think, I mean, maybe we could, it's entirely up to you, but he's dead now, so it doesn't really matter, is your attempt at, which I find quite amusing, at getting an interview with Lucian Freud.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got the photograph of the letter, the irascible letter that he wrote you, which is
You saw it when you went to the loo.
I see it every time I read it, every time I'm in your loo.
Yeah.
I'd love to sort of put that as a cutaway, because I think it's sort of like, it gives an insight into his sort of belligerence and also single-mindedness.
And his handwriting. Well, no, too, but I mean, there's one in my book. You can use that, or do you want to do it now?
I can take a photograph of it.
Yeah,
but just briefly, sort of, how did you keep contacting him then?
Oh, yeah, Lucian Freud was somebody I pursued for years, almost like a stalker. I was so keen to get an interview with him. And I keep writing to him. And one of my letters said, "Look, I know you're terribly busy, but you must sometimes have to have a meal or go to the dentist. And can I come and be a fly on the wall and sort of interview you while you're doing something else?" And he wrote this stunningly rude letter saying that although I do eat meals and go to a dentist, that's no way I'll agree to being shat on by a stranger. So I never got Lucian Freud, and I'm sorry, But the ones that got away from me is Rupert Murdoch, and I envy you terrifically. How much time did did it?
I did get a good crack of the whip because it was for a Time cover.
Oh,
I need to do one about Rupert Murdoch. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was he's a very tough guy to do, especially as he ages, and it's not like high
have
on
you
his
done
list
it
of
more than once?
Yeah, I did the Sky Company report.
Oh,
In
wow.
fact, in the previous year, the photographer had basically set up a very elaborate setup, and the two chief executives were either side, and Rupert Murdoch had come in and basically sat down, one frame, and then he just got up, and that's all the photographer got, one frame. So I actually used my the cunning strategy of having photographed his son James,
Yeah.
and also his daughter Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I think for the Observer. Did you interview either
No,
of
I
those?
didn't.
So I photographed James, I think, for Management Today, and Elizabeth for the Observer. So I brought along prints, and even the most hard-hearted arsehole is going to sort of yield slightly if you give them
great. Yeah.
pictures of their children.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've got a few pictures of him, but he had this extraordinary house in St James. That was like a Bond house. I mean, he still has it, I'm sure. And
In St James?
Yeah.
Where?
Right next to Green Park,
Ah.
right by the Ritz.
Right by where J. Paul Getty
Yeah, maybe he bought it from J. Paul Getty. I mean, it's a sort of modernist office building,
Yes.
and each floor, I think, the security guard told me, each floor, one of his children has each floor,
Has
and then
a flat.
and then he has the top floor, and then
Oh.
it's got a glass roof which is electric, and you
Oh,
can kind of just
wow.
the roof parts, and you can get up to the top. So I shot him for the sort of postage stamp kind of Time cover,
Yeah.
and then I got more of an interesting environmental portrait on the stairs.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I was really chuffed with that. But yeah, I mean, just keep plugging away.
Well, I don't know. Because for years, I thought, because I was on The Independent on Sunday and then The Observer, that, right, sort of perceived as lefty, he won't do it. And then I went to the Sunday Times and I thought, oh, now I'm on the Sunday Times, he can't refuse. And of course, they said, you can't possibly interview Murdoch for the Sunday Times. So I've never done him and I would love to. Do you think he's gaga now?
No, I don't think. I mean, I can't speak with any authority because it was a while back when I did him. But I mean, he was sharp as nails.
But how long ago?
That was a while back. That was probably around, actually, probably about 15 years ago.
Well,
So,
exactly. He could be gaga now.
yeah, I mean,
couldn't
it does seem strange, his sort of lawsuit against
Yeah,
his children and so
yeah.
on. But yeah, that's another story, I guess. I reckon we should leave you.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for watching.